Politicons Book 2, written by Oliver Arnold and narrated by Adam 11 Labs. Chapter 1. The island's north lay in darkness. While the sun had broken the horizon, tall walls of trees still cast lengthy shadows across a knoll here, sinking this green opening and its dewy grass into a deep gloom. Among this quiet harmony, only the leaves rustled audibly in the cool breeze. Suddenly, a sequence of guttural grunts cut through the peace. Out on the turf and down on all fours huffed Putrid, a stout man in his 50s stoically doing push-ups. His breath formed clouds in the morning air, but despite his minimal clothing, the chill didn't faze him. After completing the third set of 40, he rested briefly and did another 50. Finished with exercise, he turned to an arrangement of utensils he'd set up on a tree trunk nearby. Small heaps of pigment laid out in a line bordered the tools. Putrid dipped his finger in a puddle of water and into the pigment to smear the coloring mud in thick lines across his face. Then he tore off his shirt and decided to never require it anymore. Putrid was ready to face the light of a new day and a new reality. On his first day on the island, he had managed to build a bow and spear, as well as the tools needed to produce these weapons the way he envisioned them. They weren't makeshift fabrications or so-so constructions of the fine under the circumstances type. No, they were elegant utensils revealing great skill and care. As he carved the Roskvian emblem into his bow's grip, Putrid's mind veered to his childhood. He remembered running away from home, camping out in the woods, sometimes for days on end, while living entirely off the land. Similar independence had marked his adolescence. The love for the outdoors, self-reliance, and the lack of a formal education brought him to military service, where he spent countless weeks on solitary reconnaissance missions. It wasn't that Putrid didn't get along with people. He was, in fact, a great knower of men, a cynical tactician, and a talented speaker. But given the choice or tossed into such situations by life, he'd keep to himself. That his commanders made him spy on non-existent enemies, cooked up by his state to busy people like him, didn't bother Putrid. It was all a great game, and Putrid enjoyed it wholeheartedly. He didn't know boredom. National upheaval during his 20s brought him into the higher ranks of the military. There, his mix of street smarts, reliability, and an iron will landed him in the Secret Service, from where he transcended into politics and finally all the way to the top of the unfree world. And now he was here. They wanted democracy, simpletons. Putrid had spent decades building a system of order. Everything was running smoothly. Why change this gloriful arrangement? If people were good at anything, they did well under his rule. If they conspired, fantastically even. Roskvia had a wonderful security system of an ever-swelling National Guard, police, and Secret Service apparatus, as well as an army to guarantee that folks who showed disobedience found themselves in the middle of nothing, building railways to nowhere. Foreign cowards had collapsed his beautiful state, outside fools who could not grasp the value of a strong government, the idiotic bureaucrats that they were, soft and weak. Now, perhaps, they had ended up here with him on this very island. The thought brought a short-lived smile. Putrid blinked. The morning sun broke through the trees and blinded him. The day had advanced. It was time to break camp, as he knew the early hours brought small game. He picked up his gear, cleaned the site, and left without a trace. The forest's thicket soon engulfed Putrid. He took careful steps quietly, swiftly, and deliberately. On the prowl, his mind once again traveled back in time, and he remembered his first human kill. During his teen years, a group of boys approached the Roskvians' camp on one of his solitary forest trips, wrecking his gear and pushing him around. They were drunk and out for a fight. Putrid remembered the overwhelming fear that had gripped him then. They were 6 tall and strong boys, wild. Those were lawless times. While they likely wouldn't kill him, he sure was in for a beating, unless he showed superiority. When the loudest and dumbest of them approached, Putrid grabbed a wooden stick he had sharpened as a stake and brought it over his adversary with maximum strength. A large gash opened across the boy's throat, and he dropped to the ground. Putrid stood in waiting. He had no plan, scheme, or strategy other than preempting his opponent's aggression with force. But the remaining boys stood frozen, too perplexed to help their injured buddy. The grounded brawler uttered guttural noises but soon cursed and quieted. He was dead. With no appetite for hurt, his mates took off into the woods. They were nothing but loud cowards, Putrid now knew. The Roskvian snapped out of his daydream. He felt a dull hunger rising and continued his hunt. It didn't take long to locate a doe's bedding patch. Putrid contemplated the droppings, rubbed the pea between his fingers, and smelled a wad of fur. It was too late. The animal had left long ago. Putrid spotted a hare. This early in the morning, what unusual luck. The animal could secure his meals for days. He adapted his stance and advanced slowly, quietly, deliberately. Putrid calmly nocked an arrow, drew back his bowstring, aimed, and exhaled when, without warning, an overhead noise pushed the Roskvian out of his concentration. The rabbit twitched. Putrid's arrow missed its target, and the animal was off. Angrily, the Eastern ruler eyed the source, a dark aircraft flying low overhead without its nav lights on. He recognized the model as the civilian version of a Roskvian military craft, the latest and finest in his country's arsenal. A black dot shot from it. The item fell and quickly vanished behind the tree line, as did the aircraft. Quiet returned to the woods, and animal sounds rose once more, as if nothing had happened. Putrid realized he'd overreacted to the aircraft. It was the one habit he would never shake, one of his few weaknesses. His mind again traveled back in time. Putrid's childhood home, a bourgeois house inhabited by himself, his parents, and his bigger brothers, lay close to a military airport, where an unending barrage of low-flying aircraft formed the everyday oral backdrop. Both his parents were busy providing, rendering individual care for their children sparse. Putrid lacked a connection with his parents and siblings, except for one older brother. They would often camp out, where his brother taught him about outdoor survival in the woods. Putrid thoroughly enjoyed these outings, but these adventures ended abruptly one day when his brother vanished. The authorities dismissed the incident as a youthful prank. After all, this was Roskvia, where people vanished every day. Following the initial upset, his parents had to accept that their son was gone, hopefully unharmed, and that he would perhaps return one day. They never heard of him again. From then on, little Putrid camped out alone until his childhood abruptly ended when he got home after still another extensive camping trip and found their house turned into a smoking heap of rubble with an airplane's tail poking out. The accident had killed both his parents and his remaining brothers. Little Putrid contemplated his childhood home's charred remains, turned and walked off, never to return. Back in the present, Putrid's anger had passed. He grabbed his gear and jogged toward the last location of the dark splotch. He spotted it between the trees, now floating on a chute. After a brief run, Putrid reached a beach. Before entering the broad open, the Roskvian evaluated the situation, scanning the area for movement. The object's shape was now discernible as a small, square container of sorts. It had landed gently on the shore, some 50 meters ahead, right before the breaking sea. Putrid waited soberly for any action. None came. Apparently, no one had witnessed the landing, and nobody was expecting a delivery. Was it dropped by accident? The Roskvian decided to wait for another 5 minutes. Patience. He possessed lots of it. During his rise up the leadership ladder, he would wait for his superiors' promotions or their deaths. Once, someone had offered Putrid a stake in a bootleg operation. He had declined it. Putrid wasn't interested in petty theft. He wanted power, genuine power, history-altering power. Putrid never sucked up to anyone but played by the rules. This earned him goodwill from ever more powerful players. He only betrayed those below him, never his superiors. After a decade of service, they finally assigned him to politics, a cynical term for a sham government that ruled through autocracy, physical violence, and backstabbing. He approached the case, a familiar type. He'd seen these watertight boxes countless times during his military service. After a cautious inspection, he lifted it and returned to the edge of the jungle. Carefully detaching the cord and chute, he flipped the clasps open. The inside held a loaded revolver and a note addressed to him. "For our one leader, to ensure your victory." Putrid pocketed the note, hid the parachute, and buried the box in the bushes. He then returned to the water's edge and, reaching back as far as he could, tossed the gun into the sea. You heard the first chapter of Politicons 2, written by Oliver Arnold and narrated by Adam 11 Labs.